All right, so you want to make suggestions in English, huh? But
Hmm.
not just the simple stuff, right?
Yeah, you want to understand all the subtle little things that make a big difference.
Exactly. And lucky for you, you've got some pretty cool material to work with.
A whole plan for a full episode on making suggestions in English.
And it's not just like words on a page either.
No, it's got visuals, role-playing, even ideas for video clips.
It's like we're watching a podcast in our minds.
Well, what's really cool here is no matter what your English level is,
Understanding how suggestions work can help you a lot.
it can make you more confident and help you communicate better in any situation.
So let's jump in. The source starts with some pretty common phrases for making suggestions.
Like, why don't you and how about,
Those are definitely useful, but there's got to be more to it than just remembering phrases.
of course. Think of these phrases like tools. You need to know how to use them the right way.
The source talks about intonation.
And that's where things get interesting.
Intonation is a big deal.
For sure. The same phrase can sound totally different depending on how you say it.
Like, why don't you try that new restaurant? Can sound nice, or it can sound like you're annoyed.
Exactly. Let's look at, why don't we, if you say it with your voice going up at the end,
It sounds like a real question.
you're inviting the other person to work with you. But if you say it in a flat tone,
It can sound like you're not really asking.
more like a command.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the best way to get someone to like your idea.
Oh, I've definitely heard that flat suggestion before. You're right, it makes a huge difference.
So intonation is that secret ingredient. It can make a suggestion good or bad.
And the source also mentions the difference between formal and informal suggestions.
Right, you wouldn't talk to your boss the same way you talk to your friend.
Like if I said to my boss, yo, dude, we should totally push back this deadline.
I don't think they'd be too happy about that.
Probably not. The source even gives examples of how to make suggestions in a professional way.
Instead of saying we should, you can say I recommend, or it would be beneficial to.
So it's not just about being grammatically correct.
It's about choosing words that fit the situation.
It's like dressing up. You wouldn't wear a fancy dress to a casual party.
I like that analogy. Choosing the right level of formality shows you understand the situation.
And it can make your suggestions work better. Think about it. When someone tries to speak your language.
You're more likely to listen to them.
Absolutely. It shows respect. It builds trust.
So there's a lot more to making suggestions than you might think.
This is making me realize that. And the source material dives into different real-life scenarios.
Like at a restaurant planning a trip, and even dealing with a problem at work.
Ooh, the work problem. That's when things can get really tough.
That's like, you have to be careful not to say the wrong thing.
Let's say you realize a deadline for a project is impossible.
How would you tell your boss that you need more time?
Okay, I'm interested. Let's talk about that work problem and see how these different types of suggestions would actually work.
All right, let's say you're working on a project and you know there's no way you'll finish on time.
Maybe there's just too much to do or something unexpected happened.
Right, so how do you tell your boss without getting in trouble?
This is where those formal suggestions come in handy, like we talked about before.
You want to be professional, but also clear about what you need.
You could say something like, I'm concerned about meeting the current deadline. I recommend we discuss adjusting it to ensure we deliver high-quality work.
I like that. It's direct, but you're not blaming anyone.
You're also showing that you care about doing a good job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not just complaining, you're offering a solution that helps everyone.
But what if you're talking to a coworker who's also stressed about the deadline?
You'd probably talk to them differently, right?
Definitely. In that case, it's more about working together and supporting each other.
You could say something like, hey, I'm feeling the pressure with this deadline. What if we brainstorm some ways to prioritize tasks and maybe even ask for a bit more flexibility?
Yeah, that sounds good. You're acknowledging their feelings and suggesting you work together to find a solution.
And you're hinting at a possible solution without telling them what to do.
This is making me realize that making suggestions is kind of like an art.
It is. It's about understanding the situation and choosing your words carefully.
The more you practice, the better you get at it.
You start to understand those little cues and know how to adjust your language.
The source material even mentioned that even native English speakers can struggle with this sometimes.
It's a skill you have to keep working on.
That makes me feel better. I always thought native speakers were perfect at this kind of thing.
Communication is hard no matter how fluent you are.
Is there anything else from the source material we should talk about before we move on?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the source material wasn't just about theory.
It had practical exercises like role-playing.
And while we can't actually role-play here, we can still encourage our listener to think about how they would use these skills in different situations.
I like that idea. So, listener, imagine yourself in one of these scenarios. At a restaurant, planning a trip, or dealing with that tough work problem.
What kind of suggestion would you make? What words would you choose? How would you use your voice to get your message across?
And remember, there's no one right answer.
It's all about adapting your language to the situation and getting the result you want.
Okay, we've covered a lot today. From common phrases to the difference between formal and informal language and how context is so important.
But before we finish this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought.
We've been talking about how to make suggestions in English, and you've learned a lot about phrasing and context.
Now we want you to take it a step further.
Imagine you're in a real situation where you need to make a suggestion.
Maybe it's at work with friends or somewhere totally new.
It's like that role-playing idea from the source material, but we're doing it all in our heads.
Picture the scene, the people you're with, and what you want to suggest.
Then think about how you would use everything we've talked about to make that suggestion work perfectly.
This is where it gets really interesting.
It's not just about memorizing phrases.
It's about making them a natural part of how you communicate.
It's like we've given you the ingredients.
And now it's your turn to be the chef.
Try different things out and see what works best for you in different situations.
And remember, the goal isn't to become some kind of suggestion robot.
It's about using this knowledge to become a better communicator.
Someone who can share their ideas, clearly join conversations, and make a difference.
That's a powerful thought.
Mastering this can really help you shape your own experiences.
And even influence what other people decide.
Every suggestion, no matter how small, can make a difference.
It's about taking the lead, sharing your thoughts, and working with others to make good things happen.
So keep practicing, keep trying new things, and never underestimate the power of a well-made suggestion.
Who knows? You might just inspire the next big idea or start a movement for positive change.
This deep dive has given you the tools you need to master the art of making suggestions in English.
Now it's up to you to use what you've learned and see where it takes you.
We know you'll do great things. So until next time, keep those suggestions coming.
And keep exploring the amazing world of language.
Okay, so we're talking about this work problem where you can't meet the deadline.
Right, and you have to tell your boss.
You have to be careful how you say it,
Like, not just complain.
Yeah, you have to be professional, but also honest.
So these formal phrases we talked about, they could really help here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm concerned about meeting the current deadline.
I recommend we discuss adjusting it.
Ooh, I like that.
It sounds serious, right?
Yeah, and it shows you're thinking about the quality of the work, too.
To ensure we deliver high-quality work.
Perfect. You're not just saying, I can't do it.
You're offering a solution.
And that's what a good suggestion is, right? A way to fix a problem.
Right. But what if you're not talking to your boss?
What if it's a coworker who's also stressed about this deadline?
Then you might want to change your approach a little.
Yeah, you don't want to sound like you're telling them what to do.
Right, more like you're in it together.
You could say, hey, I'm really feeling the pressure with this deadline, too. What if we brainstormed some ways to prioritize tasks?
Oh, and maybe we could ask for a little more flexibility.
Perfect. You're acknowledging their feelings and suggesting you work together to find a solution.
And without overstepping any boundaries.
This is making me realize that making suggestions is a real skill.
It's like you have to read people's minds almost.
Well, you have to be aware of this situation for sure.
And know how to say things the right way.
And the source material even said that even native English speakers can struggle with this.
Wow, really?
It's something you have to keep practicing.
That makes me feel a little better because I always thought they were just naturally good at it.
Communication is hard for everyone.
So is there anything else we should mention from the source before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that it wasn't all just theory.
Right. It had those role-playing activities.
And even though we can't really do that here, we can still encourage our listener to think about how they would use these skills.
Yeah, like imagine yourself in one of those scenarios.
At a restaurant, planning a trip, or dealing with that work problem.
What kind of suggestion would you make?
What words would you choose?
And how would you use your voice to make your message clear?
And remember, there's no single right answer.
It depends on the situation.
It's all about getting the result you want.
We've talked about a lot today.
From common phrases to formal and informal language and the importance of context.
Before we finish this deep dive, there's one last thing I want to mention. We've been talking about these suggestions in English and, all those little details about how to phrase them and when to use which words.
Right, like formal versus informal.
Exactly. But now we want you to try something.
Try to actually use these suggestions.
Not just talk about them.
Think of a real situation where you need to suggest something.
It could be anything, like at work maybe.
Or with your friends.
Or even somewhere completely new.
It's kind of like those role-playing exercises from the source.
But we're just going to do it in our heads this time.
Close your eyes and picture yourself in that situation.
Who are you with?
What do you want to suggest?
And then how would you actually say it?
Think about everything we've talked about today.
All those phrases and those formal and informal words.
And that all-important context.
Use it all to craft the perfect suggestion.
This is where it gets fun.
It's not just memorizing stuff anymore.
It's about making it your own.
Taking all this knowledge and turning it into action.
Like we've given you the ingredients.
And now you're the chef.
Experiment a little.
Try different things.
And see what works for you.
The goal isn't to become some kind of suggestion machine, though.
It's about being a better communicator overall.
Someone who can share their ideas and be part of conversations and make a difference?
And you know what? Every suggestion you make,
Big or small.
it has the power to change things.
It's about taking that first step.
Sharing your perspective.
And working with others to make things better.
So keep practicing.
Keep trying new things.
And never underestimate the power of a well-crafted suggestion.
You never know. You might just inspire something amazing.
We've given you the tools to master this art of suggestions in English.
Now it's your turn to go out there and use them.
We believe in you.
Until next time, keep those suggestions coming and keep exploring the incredible world of language